On today's episode, I share how planned obsolescence has affected my life directly. Ryan calls in to share how pursuing financial independence really helped shape his perspective during this past government shutdown here in the United States. Jill calls in to discuss how she was able to get her spouse on board with FI, and we open up for the very first time our mailbag. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is your Friday Roundup.
You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, really excited to dive into this past week's episode with Nasima from financiallyintentional.com and talk a little bit about lifestyle inflation and how to combat this. And just when you have that epiphany, that realization, how quickly you can turn it around, especially when you're in this situation of having this massive income, this massive shovel. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. Yeah, this was an interesting episode with Nasima for sure. Definitely interested in diving into it, but yeah, what's going on by you?
Well, the biggest thing is I actually wanted to take a second and talk about planned obsolescence. And I say that because I just spent the last week replacing all 3 toilets in my house. And I wouldn't mention that except that a year ago, I was doing this exact same project. And what happened is I actually, had a toilet that needed a mechanism replaced. And I went to Lowe's and I bought just, whatever it is. I don't know what to describe this thing, but it has one function: refill the toilet. And I replaced essentially all 3 of them over a period of like a month. And again, almost 12 months to the date, all 3 of them have failed. So when you go to Lowe's, don't use Fluid Masters. Find anything else. I mean, probably it would be better just to find a manual pump at this point for what those things actually do. And so I actually was now, for the first time in my life, scouring around Lowe's for a premium toilet refiller device. I don't even know what this thing is called. Someone can fill it in for me, but I refuse to be in this situation 12 months from now. And my realization was, I think a lot of us focus on this idea of frugal or cheap or value, and we're trying to tease out the difference. But in my mind, I don't care how low it is. I don't care if it's on clearance. It is not worth me getting a product that I'm going to have to do this exact thing 12 months ago. Like, I don't enjoy it that much. And that was my last week. That's basically the only significant thing that I accomplished.
That's really funny. So planned obsolescence, I guess, just fill the audience in.
Yeah, so planned obsolescence, probably most prominently, within the last year or so, there was a big kind of fuss in the news about a lot of these somewhat expensive phones seeming to almost inevitably slow down after a period of like 1 or 2 years. And there was some more data to say that it had something to do with potentially the battery lives and slowing to compensate for, a degraded battery performance level. Is that a conspiracy or is that just technology? I don't know. I know all my Windows computers seem to slow down after a couple of years, except for your laptop. Actually, I'm looking at your laptop right now. It's like 10 years old, but it's still chugging along. I guess that's what you get when your favorite thing to do is just look at Excel sheets all day long. You can get more life out of it. But planned obsolescence is the idea that a company makes something knowing that it's going to fail after a period of time and you will have to replace it. That's kind of like a conspiracy theory angle. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but in this case, I will never buy this particular manufacturer for this particular device again. It just won't do it.
Yeah, I think planned obsolescence, the first time I heard it, it was related to cars. Like back in the 80s, you always heard, oh, they're only going to last you for 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is. And it's funny, Jonathan, actually, this past week, I had my own issue with planned obsolescence. I didn't tell you about this, but my car, right? My '03 Civic, Golden Boy, as you call it.
It's not even golden. I don't know where this comes from. It's just an ordinary black generic Honda.
Yep.
But for our purposes and for the rest of perpetuity in the Choose FI community, it's Golden Boy.
So the door handles on my car have all decided to essentially stop working at the same time, which is really not ideal when you want to get in or out.
You have a sunroof.
Yeah. No, I swear, my wife and daughter almost had to climb out the trunk. So we had a bit of an issue where they got locked in the car and pretty much had to frantically call me and have me come home and help them. So long story short, I had to bring the car into the shop. Unfortunately, to fix what seemingly is a fairly simple, oh, it's just a door handle. Well, it's not so easy because they have to open up the door, and it takes a lot of labor. So unfortunately, I was set back $200 and change on my car for the drivers. And now the rear driver's door is also screwed up. So yeah, we're not sure. And Laura looks at me every single time and she's like, oh, what are you doing? Just get a new car already. I
think there's actually a running bet on our Facebook group currently with whether your next car is going to be like a modest alternate version of your Honda, or whether you're just going to go full freight and get a Tesla, an autonomous vehicle, never have to drive again, windows so you don't have to deal with the outside world. It's just, and then it just sits in your driveway because you work from home.
Yeah, I drive 3,000 miles a year, but this is part of the issue. In a perfect world, maybe it might be time to stop pumping money into the car, but I realistically drive so little that what I say to Laura is, okay, this is $200, but realistically, that's going to be our yearly car expense. So does it make any sense to get a new car or even a new used car? I don't know, Jonathan.
Have you considered biking?
I have not considered biking. Yeah.
All right. Well, what about a scooter, Brad, or an e-bike? There's other options here. It'll be interesting to see what you come up with. I certainly agree with you. I mean, when you think about it, to get a $26,000 car when you drive 3,000 miles a year, like, really? It's kind of a tough decision.
Yeah. I mean, it's something we're grappling with. You hate to keep tossing money into a car, but realistically, I think this is the best path for us financially. It's really at the most, we're talking maybe $1,000 a year. I mean, that's what I've seen at the absolute most. And then I'm saying to myself, even payments on a used car, am I going to get that for $80 a month, right? That's what $1,000 a year amounts to. And that's inconceivable. My car still functions beautifully. So anyway, this is a long-standing joke and a long-standing issue I'm grappling with. But yeah, I think at this point, I'm committed until something ridiculous happens, right? Like if the engine breaks and we're talking thousands of dollars, then I have to figure this out. But if we're talking $200 to get into the car, I mean, I don't think I have much of a choice.
Or you could join our new DIY group on Facebook, and they could teach you how to replace your engine block if you needed to.
Oh, I didn't know we had a DIY group.
Brand new group. And just because so many of the people in our community are committed to learning new life skills, we figured it would be cool to have a central place where people could share the projects that they've tackled and the resources that have made that easier. And I know, Brad, for you, I'll be happy to tell you where to find it, but to our audience as well, if that sounds interesting, you can just go to choosify.com/local. I was thinking we should take a couple minutes and just talk about the true cost of car ownership, just since you were, just with your particular situation. And I realized we covered this in depth, episode 22 of our podcast. Frankly, you could just skip by my explanation of this right now and go back and listen to episode 22. It'll be much more comprehensive. But for the sake of the audience that's listening to this and wants current flow, I think it would be worthwhile just taking a few minutes and highlighting how powerful it's been for your financial situation that you're still driving your '03 Civic up to now. Even if you were to go replace it with a new car, I'd be curious for you to walk through with that old article that you wrote from back in the day, what the math says about the difference between buying even a new car and driving it forever versus managing the payments.
I wrote this article 5.5 years ago at this point on my original website, Richmond Savers, and I just called it up real quickly.
Well, hey, Brad, we'll put a backlink to that article in the show notes for you.
Yep, that's very sweet of you. So basically what I set up here was pretty much my life. I anticipated having a car for 15 years. In all likelihood, I'm actually going to have my Civic for more than that, but let's even just assume 15 years. So you have payments the first 5, then the next 10 years, you have no payments. Then I assumed I would do this over like a 45-year period, like an adult life, let's say, 3 times. I was going to have 3 new cars. I assumed just kind of no residual value, and that money that I would invest would go in a low-cost index fund. What I assumed was a $300 per month payment. It was just, this is real back of the envelope, but basically person B, so that's me, person A. Person B was going to have a $300 per month car lease. I guess pretty much every month for the next 45 years, all right, which is not unrealistic. That's what many, many people do. But just in terms of the payments, right? So in that 45-year period, I'm going to have 15 years of payments and 30 years where I have no payments. That just $300 per month times 12 months times the 30 years is $108,000. So there's that difference, obviously. But what we know, especially from the FI world, is when you're investing this money and you're investing it in low-cost index funds, I figured over a 45-year period, it was safe to assume, though of course it can be plus or minus this, I would get an 8% annual return. Those were my assumptions here. again, this is not a drastic life choice, right, Jonathan? I mean, this is my life. I'm just driving an older car that still functions perfectly. So what it actually amounted to at year 45, and now mind you, it was $108,000 in payments that I didn't make, but by investing that money, it amounted to $742,000.
Wow. And this involves you buying 3 new cars over the course of your investing lifetime. Actually, can you imagine? I was just thinking about it. What if you had Golden Boy for 45 years? Can you imagine driving Golden Boy in 2048? Like this, that's more important. Let's just talk about that. No, I'm serious. That's crazy. This one choice, this choice to have 3 modest new cars over your investing lifetime is worth $750,000. And when we talk about the path to financial independence, it's not always just pack your lunch, right? It's not always the small things. There are these structural decisions that you make that, frankly, they're not super hard. Like, I mean, if you say it, that is a very, very common sense approach to car ownership. At least it should be. That one choice was $750,000. And there's so many people, regardless of income level, truly, regardless of income level. And the one thing they always know is they're always going to have a car payment. They're always going to have a car payment. And if you think about that, if you can reframe that and again, normalize this conversation, normalize this thought process that over my lifetime, I'm going to have 3 modest new cars, 5 years of payments, 10 years of no payments. That decision is $750,000. So when someone says, I can't do this, it's impossible. Well, it's just math. It's just math. But if you're paycheck to paycheck, you're going to have to make a different choice than what you're doing now to get a different result. And this is an option. You don't have to do this, but I think it's such an easy one. And the one objection that I'm thinking of is someone saying, well, my car just won't last that long. But why? Like, we know the cars that run forever and the cars that don't. Your beautiful turbo all-wheel drive car, it's probably going to require some maintenance. Your Land Rover, probably going to require some significant expensive maintenance. But then there are other cars out there that we just know they drive forever. And when they do break down, they're pretty cheap to fix. So this is like one of those other things. If you have choices, and choice A is a car that probably with some reliability is going to last forever till 2048, and then you make the option to leave it after 15 years, and the other is the one that it adds that prestige, but simultaneously you're going to be in the expensive shops getting it replaced and having the parts imported for a premium. Let's make a choice there. It's 2 simple choices, $750,000.
Yeah, and I think when people are presented with that choice, right? Like, how many people after a 45-year adult life have $750,000? Very, very few. But if someone said to you at 22 years old, okay, here are 2 paths, lease a car every month forever, or just do this, and you're going to have $750,000, who wouldn't make that choice, right?
Or if you're a parent to a child saying, do this and I will give you $750,000. There's some way to probably influence that decision.
Right. No, that's true. But I mean, I think it's normalizing this. And you said that a minute ago, but that's a crucial point, is just getting people to understand FI is not about deprivation. I'm not deprived at all driving this perfectly functional car. And I'm pretty darn sure I'm going to have $750,000 extra than if I had just made this slightly less optimized choice. For me, as you said, structurally is a crucial aspect of setting up a FI life. It's not about the day-to-day deprivations, right? Like, you'd get really tired of life if you lived every second just worried about cutting and, oh, what can I do without? Whereas my wife and I, we don't think that way at all. Like, if we want some nice craft beer or a bottle of wine, of course we're going to get it, right? Because that's pennies. It's irrelevant almost. But when we've set up our cars properly, when we've set up the structural framework of saving money on food, and for us, for many, many, many years, it was our house. We saved probably $1,200 to $1,500 per month on our house as compared to other people in our very micro area. Those 3 items made a huge difference and propelled us to what's ultimately going to amount to millions of dollars difference just for those 3 choices.
And I want to go back to this and say, this is not the story of Brad who can't have anything. Like, because Brad made this choice then and followed that path out and has done it very comfortably, just to set the frame here, he could buy that car every single year. I mean, literally, if he wanted to, if that's where his values were and he got at this point in time, because of that same math, he could buy a car every single year from here on out and he would still be fine. That brand new car, he could have every single, just think about that. So many of us want to look like we have it now, like we've made it. We're trying to prove it to the rest of the world, but we're sacrificing our entire financial future to do so. If you can normalize the conversation and say, let me set myself up for success. Let me build these structural choices into my life that force the outcome that I want. And frankly, sometimes you have to unwind some stuff. With Nasima, that's what she had to do. She saw basically the same math and said, I can continue on my current course and I'm going to be paycheck to paycheck, but this is crazy. She might have said cray cray. She might have actually said that. This is going to be crazy. I have a wonderful income by everything that you could measure. I have made it, but I'm paycheck to paycheck. How is this possible? When she recognized that, she was able to make radical changes. Radical changes, unwinding some of this lifestyle creep. It is going to allow her to not only dig her way out and get that financial freedom clock started, that point at time at which all of your consumer debt is gone. In her case, it was actually the mortgage too, but for most people, it's just getting rid of all of that consumer debt and now building to the future. She has a $20,000 a month shovel and no debt. For the first time in her life, planning where her money goes is just a joy, right? It's like, what am I telling my soldiers to do at this particular point in time? And it's carving out this same future that we were just describing. And long before she reached this financial independence number, which in her view is only 3 or 4 years away based on her income level, she was able to then make a decision to get some of those benefits now. Like her work environment, although lucrative, was toxic. She was worried that she was going to lose her license because of the situation that she found herself in. Her particular living situation was incredibly expensive. And she was able to say, well, what if I could just kind of get the benefits of a lower cost of living area and still maintain this income level? There's so much tied into her story that is inspirational, not just for me and you as people that were interviewing her, but frankly for our audience. And I'd love to get some of your insights on this episode as well.
Yeah, without question. I took a ton of notes from this episode. And like you were talking about, it's this lifestyle. It's this life you're supposed to live to look rich, right? And she said, quote, you've been told that you're supposed to live a certain kind of way. You check off all the boxes. You did everything that you needed to do. And so this is where you're supposed to be. And she said, I make too much money to be this broke. I have to figure this out. Something has to change, right? And she just had this awakening where she's making hundreds of thousands of dollars. It has all gone from lifestyle creep. That's what's so insidious about this. You can spend this money very, very easily. But if you're just a little bit intentional, then everything switches. And there are just so many quotes. And she's talking about like her house for security. I needed that and I deserve that because I could afford it. And Jonathan, how many people do you hear say that, right? Because I could afford it.
Yeah, whenever you say I can afford it, I want to know what came in front of that sentence. Let's explore that a little bit further. Like, what is it? What is it that you can afford, and what is it that you deserve? What's driving that decision? Not to say you can't, not to say you shouldn't, but it's probably, as soon as you say that, as soon as you verbalize that, it's probably worth inspecting that, because then it comes back to value. What are you giving up? If your expenses represent your life energy, what are you trading your life energy for? And if it's for something that you don't value, like expensive restaurants, but you don't really even enjoy going to restaurants, you're just doing it out of guilt or to do it with some individuals that you want to spend additional time with, do you value that? And is there a way to reframe that and bring that back into line? And there's so many other examples of things that we purchase because it's marketed to us as important to other people, and we're trying to keep up with other people. We take other people's values and we implement them in our life. It's dangerous and it can be very expensive. I think in many cases, you can go through these list of line items and you can make different judgments on what you value. What you value may not be the exact same as what someone else's value, but if you don't inspect it, you're going to end up in a situation where you're paycheck to paycheck. Brad, I think it's so important to spend just a couple minutes pointing out probably what struck so many people. You can make $200,000+ as a nurse with an associate's degree in California. Can we just talk about that for just a second? Wow.
Yeah, that was shocking to me. And yeah, in this FI community, we're looking for all these hacks. How can you get outsized results from minimal inputs? And in this case, she didn't need to go to the fancy college. She didn't need to get $200,000 in student loan debt. She could have went and got her associate's degree from a community college. But she said she was insulted when her aunt told her to go to a community college.
I love how blatantly honest she is about these different feelings,
No, it's amazing. And, a lot of the baggage in our lives comes from the people around us and what we've been taught from the youngest of ages. And she said, she even said that about her grandfather, right? That her grandfather said, I don't even understand why you would want to pay off your debt. People are always going to have debt. And that's his mindset at 90 years old. It's amazing how we feed off of this information in good and bad. We have these preconceived notions that come into our lives from when we're at the youngest of ages.
This is why that Jim Rohn quote, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to leave it alone, but average. Who is your social circle? All right. But we got feedback on this episode. Some people saying that can't be right. You can't possibly make that much as a nurse with an associate's degree. But what if you could? You know, right? Nassim is saying this is what the situation is in this specific area. I'm not saying that you're going to make this amount as a nurse in the Midwest, but in this particular area of the country, this is market rates. And she described her exact working scenario, and that is incredibly lucrative. Someone right now also said wants to write off her story because, well, she just made too much money. That's not relatable. Are you kidding me? Just think about what you can hear from that. Like, let's say you're in a job that you have a master's degree in, like sunk cost fallacy. Well, I pursued a master's degree in this and I'm making $36,000 a year. I couldn't possibly do that. I mean, if you love it, you love what you do, and that's stay the course, there's certainly a path there. But nobody's saying that decision you made when you're 17 years old has to be your guiding light for the rest of time. You can make a change now. You can make a choice now to set yourself in a completely different direction almost overnight. I mean, we've highlighted stories and we'll highlight in the future examples of individuals that thought they knew exactly what they were going to do. And they followed the rule book and they got their degree and they applied for the jobs. And then there was no response. And then it was quiet, or the job was drastically below the threshold of what they thought it would make. Sometimes they just felt stuck. And then in some cases, individuals kind of took this jungle gym approach and said, all right, well, that didn't work. But you know what? I'm not defined by this one choice. I can move in a different direction. Like, just think about this. If you're stuck right now, associate's degree is 2 years worth of work, 2 years of work. Let's say it's 3 because you got to clean something else before that. 3 or 4 years of work. You can get a job that pays over $200,000 a year with 4 years of work, and an associate's degree only costs a fraction, a tiny, tiny fraction of what it would cost to get a master's degree or a doctorate or some such. This is incredible, man. And I think what we've tried to do is kind of build a portfolio, not to say, oh, wow, you're in the wrong job or anything like that, but to say you do have options. You are never stuck. Going back to that phrase, Billy, episode 111, Billy lost a decade of his life to prison. Got out at the age in his early 30s now. He's from the age of 21 to 31. He's been in prison. Gets out. He's starting from scratch. And he dropped one of the most powerful phrases that I've ever contemplated on the show. You have two choices in life. When you're looking at life, you can either say that the possible is impossible, which is really, really scary. If you're saying that, that's a really bad sign. You should analyze that statement. Or you can make the change to say that the impossible is possible for me. Think about that and apply that to every aspect of your life. Apply that to your income. If you're in the situation that said, I got a degree in this, and now I'm 5 years into it and it's okay, but I've hit against a ceiling, and that ceiling is below the median income. Maybe it's in the mid 30s, mid 40s, whatever it be. Pick a number, right? Maybe it's in the 20s. Maybe it's just minimum wage. How you look at that sentence, how you evaluate that will directly lead to your actions. And while a lot of this stuff comes back to mindset, I just want to say that there's something actionable here for you. If you are making $15 an hour and you think that this is the end, it does not have to be. This could be the starting place. And now that you've positioned yourself to receive new information, you now know direct actions you could take to get a job that pays upwards of $100,000 a year. This is doable. There's a nursing shortage all around this country. They are scrambling for nurses. And that's one of the reasons that the demand is so high. You could very easily retrain, reskill. You're saying, well, I don't like nursing. I don't like people. I don't like interacting with people. I don't want to do that. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to make this exact choice. But if you want to get a different result, you're going to have to do something different than you're doing now. I'm not telling you what choice to make, but I'm saying, let's move the playing field. Let's change something. Let's make one change today to get ourselves to a better place.
Yeah, and I think having options is one of the hallmarks of financial independence. And Nassima used this perfectly. You don't have to be stuck. You're talking about your jobs like getting a new job. But in Nassima's case, she was in a situation that was not serving her. While she was making, she said, almost an unlimited amount of money, right? She's making $300,000+ from working 2 jobs, but basically not much more than 40 hours per week. When you actually add it up, I think she said she had 3 8-hour shifts at the one and 2 12-hour shifts at the other. So that's like 48 hours of work to make $300,000+. But regardless, right? Putting that aside, she had a toxic situation at one of these jobs. And she said, I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to be in a job where at a basic level, I'm unhappy. She went on to say, I have a choice now. I bought my freedom. How much does that make your heart sing when you hear somebody say, I bought my freedom? By not having this debt, by getting rid of what amounted to a couple $100,000 in student loans and et cetera, and then obviously selling her houses so she didn't have that mortgage debt, which is what ultimately added up to the $1 million. right? She had $1 million in debt, and because of some smart choices, she got it down to zero. And then you have options. That is a beautifully empowering way to go through life. And she could say, all right, I don't need this toxic job anymore. I can do this on one job and still make probably $150,000, $200,000, which is crazy. But she had options. And one of those options wound up being, okay, they're going to move out of state. So she's still within driving range. She works 6 days a month. So for 24 days a month, she is in essence a stay-at-home mom, and she works on her blog, Financially Intentional. And for the other 6 days a month, she's a nurse in the Bay Area where she commutes, albeit a couple hours, and she makes a significant salary. And what a cool life that is, to be this hybrid high income earner and stay-at-home mom. I mean, Jonathan, that's amazing.
And her story is weaving in some other elements too, in particular geo arbitrage. Now, we talked in your case, the very extreme version of geo arbitrage, where you pick up and you totally move to a different area. She kind of like straddling the line. She's got 1 foot in each, essentially, like it's the best of both worlds. There's an incredibly high pay scale in this home area of Oakland that she was describing, or wherever she is now. But the tax rate is pretty high, and the cost of living is high. I mean, we remember when she left her home, she's leaving a very large home with a pretty large mortgage, and she's downsizing to a small apartment. And in that particular area, even the apartment was pretty expensive, like $3,600 a month. Yep, $3,600 a month. So what does she do after she evaluates the situation, evaluates the space, says, okay, I'm in California. And actually, John wrote in with this email just to clarify. He thinks California state income tax is actually closer. I said 10%. It's actually closer to 13%. And we got a pretty interesting comment from Joe, and it's kind of a correction and definitely something that we didn't want to like miss on this. Joe wanted to make sure that the audience knew. He says, very interesting podcast, certainly shows that a good income and meaningful spending and pay down plan can really make a big accomplishment in getting debt free, even if you've made financial mistakes earlier in your career life. One small note, as a fellow non-California resident earning income in the state of California, all income earned in California is taxed by California, regardless of where you live. This is definitely some good geo arbitrage for sure with the lower cost of living, but Cali will still get you come tax time. And Joe, really appreciate that input. And it was definitely something that probably, if you were just to listen to that episode in a vacuum, wasn't totally clear. I think that in Nasima's case, this is still massively a win for her. She's getting the benefit of the significantly higher income stream, but balancing that with a much lower cost of living. And due to the way that nursing is structured, you can work longer shifts on fewer days, which really minimizes, any sort of longer commute you may inherit with this choice. And in her case, that really opens her up with some other benefits. She gets to stay at home with her child, and then she gets to pursue some of the other things she's interested in. And one of the things that she was very cognizant about is it's her tribe, right? It's her people. It's who does she want to work with? And so she's taken on this part-time role as a coach as well, of helping other people that are trying to have a more financially intentional life figure out how to bootstrap that and really get started to implement that action plan. And you heard her explain zero-based budgeting. It always starts here. I don't care whether or not it's a low income or a high income situation. It doesn't really matter what your situation on day one. It starts with tracking and knowing what your financial picture is, and helping someone actually figure that out is not necessarily intuitive. It sounds great for us just to say, hey, track all your expenses, but okay, but how? How do you do that? And her taking the time to help people get started on this path has really been valuable for her community. And so you can see that on multiple levels, long before she reached her number, she was able to make decisions that were in her best interest, were in her child's best interest, and design a life that she can get excited about. And it's why we talk about financial independence is kind of being an umbrella for giving us space to explore all the ideas and all the things that light us up. Explore all of that. Give us the time, not just in our golden years, but in our best years. Do that now. And Brad, we got some really good feedback on this episode. In particular, Kim says, Nasima was such a great guest. Thanks to her and both of you for an insightful show. There were so many messages and takeaways here, but the biggest for me was moving away from the hustle and grind mentality to one that focuses on quality of life and wealth generation. This is golden advice, and I'm implementing it in my life as of yesterday. Heidi says a couple takeaways for me. Hard work. She described it as a grind, and I would add with a purpose. Takeaway number 2, educate yourself financially as soon as you can. She could have avoided some student loan debt by understanding what she was getting into. This is a lesson for all parents of kids, high school kids. And in lesson 3, you can dig out from any hole if you really want to. Thanks for giving us excellent examples of how to get this done. And I think, Brad, it's worth pointing out that while a lot of her debt was in the context of $1 million of debt. A lot of it was a house, right? It's kind of a one fell swoop. She had to grind her way out of $300,000 between consumer debt and student loans. I paid off right around 168, and it is not easy. And to continue that forward, you have to like change what lights you up from buying stuff, honestly, to paying off debt lights you up. I remember at one point, as I was going down this debt repayment rabbit hole, sending them those checks was like my favorite thing. I would know my payday would land Thursday morning, and I was immediately on their server processing exactly. And it was kind of zero-based budgeting, although I didn't use those words at the time. I knew how much money I was going to be setting aside to each one of my goals, and I was just sending them as much as I could as soon as it landed. Because if I didn't plan for it, if I just let it sit there for too long, I was going to come up with something else to use it on. But by kind of dictating, this is my goal, this is my objective, keep my head down, get out of debt, pay off that debt. That's how you're able to, over a period of time, really pull off something significant.
Yeah, and I think, as Heidi said, thanks for giving us excellent examples. That is such a crucial portion of this, that people out in the audience hear that this is possible, that someone like them is doing it. It's amazing how people connect to these stories. And Naseema did that herself when she started listening to Dave Ramsey, right? She said, even though it didn't seem like he could relate to this girl from Oakland, she said, the stories were so motivating and I cried almost every time I heard them. Humans connect to other humans. And when we see people succeeding and doing stuff that we didn't know was possible, Naseema didn't even know this was possible. She had been brought up that, oh, you're going to have debt forever. Everybody has student loans. Well, she changed that entirely. Now she not only doesn't have debt, but she has a space in her life to be able to make these slightly unconventional choices, but that work for her and work for her family. And that is a beautiful, beautiful place to be.
All right. Well, Brad, I thought we could go and take a few minutes and just play a few voicemails from our community. And first, I actually wanted to, and this is really timely, I wanted to play a voicemail that we got for Ryan with some comments on how pursuing financial independence affected him with this government shutdown.
Hello, Jonathan and Brad. I really enjoy your podcast with Choose FI. And I wanted to take some time to really explain the scenario that I'm going through right now with the government shutdown that is happening. That's been in the news, I'm sure, for the past 34 days. And as I have taken my step to the journey towards FI, I've been impacted by the government shutdown. And I've kind of taken this opportunity to really understand this mini retirement phase that a lot of people talk about and the FI community. And it's really given me the opportunity to say, wow, I guess I'm experiencing that pre-retirement stage during the shutdown as I'm, not working, I'm not getting paid. So instead of just kind of going crazy like a lot of other people are doing and just like, oh, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, you hear that a lot in the news for government workers. I've done a good job of maintaining a nice, healthy savings balance and combination of investments. But I'm really learning that this is a great opportunity to really explore the options that are available during this government shutdown and look at it a different way and understand that, hey, there's a lot of opportunity here for me to really go out and explore new things, new opportunities, look at side hustles, look at passions that I'm excited about doing. And I've been experiencing that a lot during the shutdown, volunteering at local schools, doing some side gigs like, driving the Uber, working on creating a blog and explaining my destination, my journey during the shutdown. So I really wanted to kind of get you guys' take on that, but I really appreciate everything that you're doing with the podcast and look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for the voicemail. And certainly I just want to take a second and say, Choose FI is a non-political place. We never talk politics, but the beautiful part about this has nothing to do with politics at all. He's talking, obviously, how this particular government shutdown impacted him, but you could fill in the blank. So let's talk about Ryan here. He took a situation that for many people could be ruinous. He had essentially no paycheck for, I think he said 34 days. He took that and looked at it as a positive. Instead of having this external force acting upon him and it destroying his life, he went out and said, what can I do to experience this? And he talked about exploring his area. He talked about volunteering. He talked about creating a blog. He talked about driving for Uber. I mean, this is so cool that he got to explore this. This is a little mini retirement in essence to see hey, what does my life look like without this job, right? How many of us are tied into our jobs as if that's what defines us? Well, Ryan just had an example where, hey, I've got a month to figure out what defines me as a person. And I mean, to me, that's pretty amazing. Obviously, in Ryan's perfect world, this government shutdown didn't happen. That, again, is that external force. You want it on your own choice and your own time. But this is a fantastic way to respond to this.
And the biggest part to me that really, really stood out to me is the fact that FI isn't binary. It's not 1 or 0, the heroes that are FI and all the people struggling to reach FI. No, like it's a continuum, right? And you're continuing to draw that power and bring that power to your side of court the entire way. And it comes to mind that someone that is paycheck to paycheck is one broken microwave away from an existential crisis. All right, well, frankly, nobody's life was ruined over a microwave. Bad example, but like come up with your own one flat tire, away from an existential crisis, one broken windshield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you have 1 week's worth of savings, when you have $1,000 in the bank, when you have 6 months worth of savings, when for the first time in your life, you have space between your income and your expenses, that's power. And then if you can aggregate those small wins, that single win, which was the first time that you no longer had to pay off your credit card as soon as you got to your next paycheck, the first time that you were actually telling your money where to go because you were making plans for your future. If you get there, all along the way, you're continuing to aggregate that power. And in Ryan's case, we don't know his net worth. He could be a multimillionaire, or he could have 2 years worth of expenses saved up. But he wasn't paycheck to paycheck, and he wasn't living on the edge. And if you're in this community and you're pursuing this path, that's going to be your story very, very quickly. We've talked to individuals that within 6 months have tripled their net worth. Within 6 months have achieved all of the things that we just mentioned. You can do this. You're not stuck. And your challenges can be different. Like it's not always the same. Some people, it's not a money issue. It's a mindset issue. And it's not always your mindset, right? Sometimes it's like, how do I get my spouse on board? I'm all in. But whenever I bring this up, I just hit a wall. And Brad, I love this. We actually got this voicemail from Jill, and she's calling in to discuss how she was able to get her spouse onto the FI wagon. And man, this voicemail, it speaks for itself.
Hi, Brad and Jonathan. This is Jill from Charleston, South Carolina. I just wanted to call in and provide some information on how I was able to get my spouse on board with FI. This is a topic that is covered a lot on both the podcast and the Facebook group, so my particular strategy, while some may consider unique, could be of value to some of your listeners. Brief background on myself: I have been an avid Choose FI listener for well over a year and a half, and frankly dove headfirst into the rabbit hole ever since. I first discovered Choose FI through a Dave Ramsey Facebook group, and pretty much binge listened to all the shows within a few weeks. From here, I discovered and now religiously listen to other podcasts such as Afford Anything, Stacking Benjamins, and Bigger Pockets Money, to name just a few. However, with every weekly win or budget cut or dollar saved, my husband was not sharing in this enthusiasm. Don't get me wrong, he supported my newfound frugal nature and thought saving more, spending less was a great idea. I got many "way to go, honeys" when we stuck our meal plan or made an extra principal payment on a mortgage. But I so wished that this fire would spark in him as well. I wanted this path to be a joint effort we both could get excited about. I'd tell him about the podcast or I'd send him some blog links, but the interest, or as he would probably say, the time, just wasn't there. Needless to say, after a year of feeling that I was bearing the weight of our goal setting and our goal achieving for our family, the announcement came out this past November for Camp FI Southeast. Initially, I had already planned out how I was going to attend and what type of questions I would ask. I mean, this was a star-studded lineup, and frankly, I would be fangirling the whole time. I mean, these are the experts that I've been listening to for well over a year. But then I thought maybe, just maybe, this is the opportunity to get my husband on board with FI and have him go instead. So you might think, how could I convince him to attend a retreat that he knows nothing about with people that he has never heard of? Well, I use what I call the power of the tired parent. You see, we have 2 small children that keep us really busy. So when I approached him and said, "Honey, how would you like to get away for 4 full days by yourself? It's a Choose FI retreat, so maybe you'll learn a few things, but most importantly, you're going to get away and hopefully relax." Well, let's just say he pretty much jumped on the idea after that. So fast forward to day 1 of camp, and I'm getting text messages from him like, I'm completely a fish out of water here, or I don't know anyone. And then on day 2, I'm getting text messages. You're right. We really need to dive deep into our budget to see where we can cut. To by day 3, hey, honey, I just spent an hour one-on-one with Chad Carson talking real estate. Let's get a game plan when I get home. Oh my gosh, I was floored. Was this really the same person that I had sent to Camp Fi? When he returned, I'm telling you, the fire had been lit. He is talking travel rewards and investment properties and retirement savings. It's like he understands now the importance of Fi and how we can't go this path alone. He's even set up monthly goal date nights so we can go over our goals for the month and how we're going to reach them. That's it, really. If any of your listeners are struggling to get their spouses on board with Fi, just sign them up for Camp Fi. Really, thanks to it, the fire has spread. Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work.
Oh, man, Brad, Jill is like a Fi Jedi master.
Yeah, this is amazing. Jill, what a game plan here. And it's funny, I actually met Jill's husband, Steve, at this Camp Fi in question. Yeah, on night 1, he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
What did I do? I'm not quite sure how I got it. Now we know it's the exhausted parent tactic. Yeah. I'm telling you, my wife would take all of us up on that one right now.
But yeah, it was amazing. I mean, seriously, by the end, I talked to him Sunday night and he was just so enthused. And nothing was being shoved down his throat. Obviously, he really dove into it. I mean, to his great credit, right? Like if Jill signed him up for this basically as a vacation, he could have just sat in his room and listened to music or read a book, but he dove in. He was part of everything, asking questions and just really enjoying himself. And yeah, I mean, this one camp changed his entire life. On Sunday, he was ready to make changes. We actually recorded a little video of me and him talking, and he sent it off to Jill. And yeah, it's just really cool to see how excited he could be. And I don't know, Jonathan, like clearly not everybody out there is going to follow this path, but how do you think this is transferable for someone who's looking to get their significant other on board?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. And I think while I would love to make this the end all be all episode on how to get your spouse on board, I don't think that would be doing everybody, a disservice, make sure I say that right. But regardless, it's kind of like over time, we have started to aggregate enough of these. So if you've been with us since the beginning, you started on episode 1, you've worked your way throughout the episodes, inevitably, little bits of information have come through and it's kind of helped build that. I mean, this is probably one of the more profound and extreme ideas, but at the same time, like, I love it. You can see how it would work. Everything that's priceless. But it's almost like when you tie a few of these kind of separate ideas together, that's when you start to build a strategy. So for instance, I'm thinking about, what is it that you value? This is something we talked about with Scott Rickens. Another person called in a voicemail about this last year. And it was Scott basically when he was about to pursue this journey. And in this case, I think he was going to make the case to move away from their home and potentially go on this 1-year road trip and do all these sorts of, this really fun adventure. One of the things he did before that is he asked his wife, Taylor, I want you to make a list of the things in this world that you value the most. Give me your top 10 list of what your perfect life looks like or what it is that you'd want to have as part of your weekly routine. She wrote this list after putting some thought into it, and he read through it and went back to her and they just talked about it. And what happened was when you demoed this list, when you went through them one line item at a time, they noticed that a big house didn't show anywhere up on this list. Her cars didn't show up anywhere on this list. Rather, it was kind of the small things, right? And I want to kind of tease the ending here. The big things are the small things for most of us, whether or not you can acknowledge that right now or not. But in her case, it was, I want to spend time with my husband and our baby. I want to take walks together. I want wine, cheap or expensive, and chocolate. But the wine is critical. And there were just a few others. And a lot of this had to do with experiences and quality time. And Scott, rightly so, pointed out this very high cost of living area that we're in and our exact situation doesn't show up anywhere on this list. So why are we beating our heads against a wall here, paycheck to paycheck, kind of in a similar situation as Nasima, when it doesn't show up on this list of things that you value? Could we make another choice that would give us the best of both worlds? We'll focus on what we value and we'll discard everything else. When you make that frame and you pursue that, again, going to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, you make a few structural choices and everything else gets easier. And not to say everybody needs to move or everybody needs to leave or everybody needs to move or everybody needs to sell their cars or, whatever. But if you're paycheck to paycheck and you're stuck, you're going to need to do something differently than you're doing right now if you ever hope to get a different result.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think the example of Scott and Taylor is a great one. And it comes down to me to motivation. Look at what lights your significant other up. It probably isn't the fancy cars and the expensive vacations. That's just papering over your life with expensive things. What are the motivations, right? So I think probably way back at this point, 170 odd episodes ago, we had an example of someone who called in whose significant other wanted to go out to expensive dinners. They actually had a conversation about why they were spending all these hundreds of dollars per month on these dinners. She said, I just want to spend quality time with you.
Or really, I just want you to put the phone down.
Right.
Like if it takes $300 for you to put the phone down and just focus on me.
Yeah, and leave it in the car. You need to get to the heart of what's motivating someone. What do they want their life to look like? And I thought Scott did a brilliant job asking Taylor, just write this list down, right? What are the 10 things in your life, approximately 10 things, that you get true joy and contentment from? That exercise changed their entire lives. That made her open her eyes to say, we don't need to live in expensive Coronado, California anymore. We can enjoy ourselves. And really, we can get to our goals so much faster if we moved. And what are our goals? Our goals are spending time with family and friends. I think that's what so many of our goals are, right? And that isn't about expensive stuff. It's about quality time. So to me, that is just a brilliant starting point to just get the conversation going. And yeah, it's cool that in this case, Jill and Steve are having this conversation. Again, like you said, she took it to the extreme. I'm not sure so many people are going to relate to that, but man, get the conversation going.
Jill, I relate to that. That was awesome. All right. Hey, Brad, I thought for this last part of this episode, we could just take a couple minutes and reach into the mailbag, new thing we're going to try out here. And in particular, we're just tackling a few questions from week to week. If you want to have your question featured on a Friday Roundup, all you need to do is just send us a tweet at ChooseFI, hashtag mailbag. We'll feature it on our Friday Roundups. And this first question is from Sarah. And Brad, the question's to you, asking about calculating your savings rate. And actually, we got to come back and talk about your profit and loss statement here in just a second. I'm not letting you get off the hook that easy. But with regards to savings rate, her question is, are you allowed to use the company match amount as part of your savings rate? So many companies, when you're an employee, if you fund your 401k, maybe they'll fund it up to 100%, up to 4% of your salary if you put it in first. That's the company match program. How do you account for that? If this were your situation, how would you account for that in your savings rate?
All right, so this is a good question. I definitely include it in my savings rate. No question about it. This is savings, as far as I'm concerned, that adds to my net worth. If I made a choice to put nothing in my 401k, this money would not be coming my way. So unquestionably, this gets added to savings rate. I think, Jonathan, you talked that you would add it to the numerator and denominator, right?
Yeah, I'll link to Big Earn's article. He has a fantastic article in the show notes for this episode where he actually provides 4 different ways to calculate your savings rate. If you listen to our episode that we did several weeks ago, our episode 108R, where we kind of talked about our individual approaches to calculating our savings rate, we worked through all 4 of the options that Big Earn listed, and both of us kind of agreed that number 3, which I could go into detail, but maybe you just go back and listen to that episode because we really go into detail on that, is our preferred way. And basically it's based on, it's your savings rate based on your after-tax compensation. That just gives you the best balance. It gets rid of maybe this extra types of compensation that you get from your employer that you don't really have any control over, and just focuses on, it gives you the best chance to focus on what you actually have control over. One of the points that we made in that episode is that your savings rate, while incredibly valuable for yourself as a comparative tool, really isn't very good when you're comparing your savings rate to somebody else's, because you don't know if they're using the same math. Like, for instance, do they include their company match as part of their savings rate? Maybe, they do and you don't, or vice versa. It makes it hard to compare apples to apples. It's more like comparing apples to tangerines. So I think this is a great question from Sarah, and I'm glad she asked it. But I want to use this opportunity to ask my good friend Brad here about the Barrett profit and loss statement. In 108R, the episode that we talked about, Brad had a sheet that he uses to both calculate his net worth, but then more importantly, calculate all the different details that you would need to be able to effectively come up with your savings rate at the end of the year. We asked him to scrub a version of it and give it to us so that we can use it for the community. And Brad, I know a week or two ago, you were working with Jeff to kind of prettify it and make it easier to use. Have we got a completed product that we can send out to the people on our newsletter yet?
All right, we are getting closer. Jeff has been amazing, and he's a real guru with Excel. But it was funny. I sent him over my sheet, and he got it. But then I asked him a question. I'm like, Jeff, is this going to make sense to anybody? And he's like, honestly, no. So
It's so obvious. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's so simple, Jonathan. All I do.
Yeah, I had a sense that that it was going to be fairly confusing. So rest assured, everybody out there, we are working on coming up with a product that's actually valuable for the community. So it's going to take us a couple extra weeks, I suspect, but we will mention it on a Friday Roundup here coming up in the near future. And when we have it all ready, and we'll release it via one of our Tuesday Insider emails. So definitely get on our email list. Just go to choosefi.com/vault and sign up for the email list. And you'll get this as soon as Jeff and I can get it all set and locked down.
All right, this next one is from Jock, and Jock says, just a statement. I have been far from active trying to get my saving game on for the past 2 months. I finally come to grips that there are more important things than money. I went to see my dad and grandmother's gravesite yesterday, and I will work my last day at my second job on Thursday because it isn't worth losing time with family. I have money in savings, money in investments. I've paid off house, 29 years old. I'm overworking for nothing. I hope everyone takes the time to see that family and friends are more important than money. My dad passed away at 49 and my grandmother at 50. Take your time as truly important. Brad, I think this highlights kind of what we're talking about as well. Time is your most precious, non-renewable resource. And with that in mind, it's not just what are you not spending, but what are you putting your energy into generally? And if you're living for the weekend, right? If the only days that light you up are the 2 days on the weekend, that's a long way to live out a 30 or 40 year working career.
Yeah, and this reminds me of something that Deanna said in episode 106, which we titled From Addiction to FI. And it just hit me so hard in particular because it was about spending time with your kids. And Deanna said something to the effect of, if FI gives you that space to spend time with your kids and even take a year off or whatever it may be, do it. You can never get that time back. And yeah, it's incredible to see Jacques doing that in his own life. And as Jacques said, treat your time as truly important.
You know, Brad, I say this knowing that you're going to laugh at me, but I think it's somehow tied. So I mentioned a couple weeks ago that I'm working with my wife on potty training our son. All right. Hold back in reserve. Oh boy. But he's almost there. It's, still work in progress. And I'm sure, it's one of those things that you still, he's pretty young for this. I didn't realize this at the time. My wife just said, hey, we should work on this. And I just didn't question it. Everybody else tells me that we're doing this really soon. Whatever. If you don't know that it doesn't work, then at some point it works. But I realize as I'm spending all of this time with him, how precious that is. Like I spent a solid week just with him, giving him the time and the space that he needed to learn this new skill. It's talent stacking. I mean, you got to start somewhere. But in this case, what did we do with this time? Well, we were reading books. We were singing songs. We were staying active. I was making sure, that he wasn't out of sight, that nothing was going wrong. This is just what it was. And while you can laugh about this, and I laugh about this, I realize that scale that out. What a privilege to be able to have this time to work with him on this skill. And how does this spill over into all these other aspects of his life when we're going camping for the first time? We're having a fire in the backyard, whatever it may be. This is like a taste, a semblance of that. And I feel very privileged to be able to have those times with my loved ones, not in my golden years. I don't want to interact with my son's kids. I do. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but I want to interact with my son. And he's never going to be 2 years old again. And so, Jock, I'm really grateful for you for, sending this message. And to our audience, we would love for you to be a part of this conversation. And we're trying to make it super easy. So again, if you want to join the conversation with a question or a comment, 240 characters or less, just send us a tweet to @ChooseFI, #mailbag, and we will include that as part of our Friday conversation going forward. All right, my friends. Well, unfortunately, that's going to bring this episode to a close. Now, as you know, we like to finish every episode by doing a drawing for a copy of a book that we have found useful. And there's 3 books that we offer. The first is J.L. Collins' book, The Simple Path to Wealth. The second is Dominic Cortuccio's book, Design Your Future. The third book from Vincent Puglisi, Freelance to Freedom. If you want to enter the drawing, all you need to do is just go to choosefi.com/iTunes, follow the instructions there, leave us a short written review, and then send us an email to feedback@choosefi.com, letting us know that you left a review and what screen name you left it under. We give away 1 book for every 5 written reviews that we get, and we announce the winner on the Friday Roundup. Brad, how many winners do we have today?
All right, Jonathan, we have 1 winner today, and the winner is Roxanne. And she called this a fantastic podcast. I found my way into the FIRE community by chance, having been a follower of the principles for a long time, but never really having a name for it. This podcast is full of interesting interviews, tangible actions, and great topics. It's a must listen for anyone interested in raising their net worth. Isn't that everyone? I hope everyone out there starts listening and taking action. And if anyone can motivate you, it's Brad and Jonathan.
All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.